Hey everyone, just a couple of minutes. Let's give the folks a couple of minutes to join and we'll get started shortly. Do you guys hear me now? Perfect. All right. So let's get started. A very good morning and thank you for joining us on this webinar today. Um, in today's webinar, it's all about Python. So let's get started. So this webinar is brought to you by Lovelytics. We are a data consulting firm and we specialize in everything data. Our tools of innovation primarily consists of Alteryx, Tableau, Snowflake, Mapbox, and Salesforce. We are also an associate partner with Alteryx, and our primary goal is to ensure that our clients get the most out of their investment in Alteryx. In case you're interested, please reach out to us on these platforms and please feel free to connect with us. So I am Amarendra. I lead our Alteryx practices here at Lovelytics. I am responsible for the enablement and adoption of Alteryx with our clients. I recently moved to Toronto from the US. I've been using Alteryx for about 4 years now. I was one of the leaders for the Alteryx Philadelphia user group. I'm currently working on my partner certifications and recently nominated as an innovator and advocate. Before we move on to today's agenda though, I'd like to pass on something valuable. If you have attended our last webinar, you know the drill. Here are a list of resources that I've curated to help you get started or get better with Alteryx. So to begin with, we have the Alteryx community. It's a one-stop shop for everything Alteryx. You will find use cases, discussions, tool mastery series, macros, and a whole lot more. So be sure to check it out. Next, we have the Alteryx Academy. It's a learning playground with interactive lessons, weekly challenges, and certifications. Alteryx also had a podcast. It's where they discuss anything from new features, user group discussions, data science trends, enablement, so on and so forth. And it's called Alter Everything. Finally, a quick conference update. Alteryx conference, formerly called as Inspire, is now rebranded as Analyticon. Due to the pandemic, the postponed date is now June 2021. For registrations or refunds, please feel free to reach out to this URL that you see on the screen. And in addition, you can also email analyticon@alteryx.com. So for those of you who already use Python daily and are looking for applying it or using it in Alteryx, here is a quick cheat sheet. We will share this with you after the webinar. You can use the sheet to replicate the most frequently used Python functions in Alteryx. All right, so today we introduce you to the Python tool in Alteryx. We try to convince you that Alteryx and Python are a match made in heaven. And finally, we show it to you in practice by going over some advanced use cases. So this session is for intermediate and advanced users of Alteryx. For Alteryx users who are trying to learn Python, and for Python users who are trying to learn Alteryx. And our objective here is to bridge the knowledge gap between Alteryx and Python. And in case if you're someone who's new to Alteryx, then we encourage you to attend one of our half-day training sessions or use the community resources to get familiar with the tool. And now I would like to introduce you to Sean Koo, who is our lead data scientist on the team. He lives and breathes Python, so you're in good hands. Sean, take it away.
All right, thanks, Amar. So I'm going to share my screen, and then we can get started. All right, so thank you everyone for coming today for our presentation on Alteryx and Python. So like Amar mentioned, I'm the lead data scientist here at Lovelytics. So I've been coding for about just a little bit over 2 years. I started with R and then moved to Python. So I'm pretty familiar with both languages. But today, unfortunately, we're just talking about Python because we only have a bit of time for that. But I've also used, I'm also a very frequent user of Alteryx. I've cleared 2 of the certifications. I sometimes use Tableau and Snowflake. So that's my background. And I'm very excited to be able to talk to you today about Python. So what exactly is Python, and why is it so popular? And I think if you've been looking around various websites, social media, you'll find that Python has become one of the most popular programming languages. So I think it's useful to dive into what exactly is Python. So it's what we call a high-level general-purpose programming language. Released in 1991. So I'm not sure if this counts it as fairly new or fairly old, but I do know that Python is something that a lot of people are trying to learn today. So what we mean by high-level and general-purpose is that for Python, a lot of the difficult parts are abstracted away for you. So that's what a high-level language is. And general purpose means you can generally use Python to do many things. And this is in contrast to R, for example, which some of you might be familiar with, which is much more focused on statistical inference and interpretation. So that kind of distinguishes Python from the rest. And if you look at the chart on the right, and we can see the number of Stack Overflow questions in a particular month, which is a really good reflection, I think, of people's interests in the language, as well as how big the community is at different points in time. And if you look over here, we start with Python originally started in 2009 with just under 4%, but it's basically more than tripled its proportion of posts within a 10-year period. And so that's pretty impressive for Python. And a big part of it is due to its applications in data science. You can see that R has also similarly had such a significant increase in the number of people who are taking it. So with all these in mind, why exactly is Python so easy and so popular for people to learn? And one of this is because it's really an emphasis on readability and clarity that distinguishes it from other programming languages. So if you look over here in the first line, we have something where fruits equals apples and pears. That's what we call a list in Python. So I'm sorry for all the people who already know Python. This is just a really brief introduction for people who are pretty new to Python, but are really experienced in Alteryx. So just wanted to give people an idea about what it looks like in Python itself. So we also have loops where we can iterate over the different parts of the list. We can call the length of the list, and that gives us a number. We can also extend a list, and that gives us, we add mangoes to the list of fruits. So a lot of these are fairly simple. If you can think about how you would explain this code, I would say, for every single fruit in this list of fruits, I want to print a statement that includes the fruit in it. And this is not something that you can do for many languages, in fact. So Python is written specifically to allow you to allow the code to be as readable as possible and allow it to be as clear as possible, so that you don't have to spend too much time understanding what's going on behind the scenes in the code. In addition to that, there's also an extensive list of packages that provide a lot of additional functionality. There's a huge community of open source contributors who basically, spend their free time building packages that help you do various things. So you want to do data science, there are tons of data science packages that people are contributing and maintaining for absolutely for free. There are also many people who are contributing to other packages that do a lot of other things. So web scraping, web authentication and stuff like that. So this is part of the reason why Python is so popular. But I think the big question for most people is, what do we really need to use Python on Alteryx? And I think my answer, having used both, is that in most cases, you don't actually need to. And in some cases, actually, Alteryx is far easier to use than Python itself. So for example, if I'm going to do an aggregation, I could just use the sum tool. Instead of having to type, I think at least 1 or 2 lines of code, it's not that straightforward on Python itself. So many of these data manipulation, analytics, and data science needs are already addressed using native Alteryx tools. So in most cases, you don't actually need to use Python on Alteryx. But sometimes there are really, really specific use cases that Python can address, but they're not super available on Alteryx yet. So for example, this is a good example because this is an example where Alteryx is steadily expanding its repertoire of tools, and those that repertoire of tools actually extends into what people previously used Python for. So if you're familiar with natural language processing, so that's text analysis for data using data science tools. Natural language processing used to be something that was only really available through the Python tool on Alteryx, because that's where you can bring in libraries for sentiment analysis, emotion, tagging, and text topic modeling, for example. All of these things used to only be available on Python itself, but now with the latest Alteryx edition, and I think it's the Intelligence Suite, you get NLP tools native in Alteryx itself. You don't even need to start writing any Python code. So there are highly specific use cases where Python is really, really useful. And I think that's kind of the best blend of both worlds, where Alteryx handles the 90% of your needs, and the last 10%, these are things that are really, really kind of dependent on your specific requirements and your specific use cases, and therefore it's not not as available on Alteryx yet, and that's where Python can fit and fill that gap. So when exactly is Python handy? Because I know I talked pretty generally before this. So any of your general programming needs. So for example, if you have web scraping, if you have the OAuth2 authentication, for example, some of you might be familiar with this, some you might not. That's fine. I just wanted to give a really specific example for just to show you, how kind of really specific stuff we're getting into for this. Sometimes you want to bring in state-of-the-art machine learning models. They were only recently released. So like extraboost, that was within the last 5 years, catboost within the last 3 years, BERT by Google. So all these things, obviously it takes time for Alteryx to build them into native tools. And so all of these machine learning models, if you wanted to bring them in today, you can do that with the Python tool without having to worry too much about having to run that separately outside. The last one is iteratively nested for loops. So if you have like, for loop within for loop within for loop, which is generally not good Python practice anyway. But if that is something that is necessary for your use case, sometimes it's a little bit easier to use a nested for loop in Python itself than to stack multiple iterative macros together. So that just saves you time as opposed to being something that's not possible. And I think the most important thing to think about is, what is the comparative here that we want to talk about? And the comparative is either we run the Python script externally. So I have a separate process, maybe I run a cron job that runs the Python script and then generates an output, a CSV file. And then from that CSV file, Alteryx reads it in and does whatever it needs to do from there. So that's a little bit annoying, to be honest, right? Because you have two different processes for something that ideally should be within one process. There are more sources, potential sources for error. because it could be your Python script, it could be your Alteryx workflow. It's also harder to synchronize between the two because you have to make sure that your cron scheduler kind of matches your schedule for your Alteryx workflow itself. So running externally, it's possible, but it's not super ideal. And in some cases, you might just choose to not do it, which is a little bit of a pity because obviously these things that you are trying to do are things that are really, really important or really add that final edge to your workflow. And so really having a Python tool gives you all that flexibility while giving you the convenience and the power of using Alteryx tools in the workflow. So my answer to this is, yeah, I mean, in many cases, we probably don't need to use it. That's a good thing. And for the relatively few cases where you do, it's a great tool for that. So today, I'm going to cover kind of four different things. You can see the 4 containers. So the first one, I'm going to talk really briefly about the basics of using the Python tool. I'm going to show you how you can use the Python tool for web scraping as well. And then I'm going to show you how you can incorporate Scikitlearn with Alteryx. So for those of you who are a bit more familiar with data science on Python, Scikitlearn is the biggest machine learning package there is. It has almost absolutely everything inside. And so I'm just going to show you how you can incorporate it with Alteryx. And the last one is a custom connector that we built that we use Python to handle OAuth 2 authentication. So without further ado, I'm going to start moving into Alteryx itself. Okay. So the first thing, so let's open a new thing. Okay, so I'm going to show you. So I just want to give you a brief introduction to the Python tool. So if you look, when I open the Python tool here, there is an interactive Jupyter notebook here. So for those of you who are familiar with Python, this is something that's very, very familiar for you. Jupyter notebook tends to be pretty much the standard where people start learning Python from. But for those of you on Alteryx, this is how you can interact with Python. So for example, if I wanted to do something simple like 1 plus 1, and I hit Shift and Enter, that gets me the output, which is 2. And so this is basically an interactive way in which you can run Python code, and you can continuously iterate that Python code, regardless of whether you're first just starting out to write your code or you just want to test certain bits of your code. And over here, I'm going to go to these specific things, but just give me 1 sec. So there was a little bit of a problem before this. So I'm just going to copy and paste the code here first. Okay, so the first thing you want to note is, sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, so the first thing you want to note, especially for people who are more familiar with Alteryx, is that, with Python, is that there are a lot of different packages that you can install on Python itself. So the thing about in the Python in Alteryx itself is that this is a separate environment. So you have to start installing packages that you would use that are not already available in the standard Alteryx configuration. So what is included in the standard Alteryx environment are things like pandas, which is basically the main package that people use for dealing with data frames. So something like this, you can see that it's already downloaded for you. Scikitlearn is also already downloaded for you, which is super helpful. But sometimes there are some special things that you want to be able to look at that you want to be able to use that are not available in the standard configuration. So for example, I'm going to install here Seaborn, which is a data visualization thing, Selenium, and request OFlib. So I'm going to delete the last one first because I already have that. So let me run that really quickly. So what this does is that this packages looks in the environment, the Python environment of this Python tool, and it says, okay, I'm going to look for these 2 packages. If they're already installed, that's great. If they're not installed, then I'm going to go ahead and try installing them. I mean, you can see here that I've already installed Selenium, which is the web scraping tool. But for Seaborn, I haven't installed it yet. So now that's exactly what it went ahead and did. So now I can do something like import Seaborn as SMS. And that's it. So that's how you can import packages. So I apologize for this kind of like running back and forth, but something went wrong with my workflow. So I'm having to do it a little bit more on the fly. So just hope for your patience over here. So what I'm having here now, the next step that I want to go through is how to bring data into this Python environment. So over here, you can see that I have a CSV file that I'm reading into the Python tool. So how exactly do I read things into the Python tool? So it's all well and good that I can install packages. Oops, sorry. And I'm going to comment that out and rerun it just to give us some space. So if you look over here, the next bit that would be important to look at is reading in data. And the most important thing for those of you who are already pretty familiar with Python is that the data is usually read in as a pandas data frame. And if I try and run this, I'm going to get an error because it says, unable to connect to input data. And the reason is simple. I do actually have to run the workflow first in order for that data to be available. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the workflow now, which is 5.3 megabytes, and that's done in a sec. So now you can see that it says success, reading input data 1. So if I hit DF over here, oops, sorry. If I hit DF over here, I get my data frame over here. So look at it. So this is a pandas data frame, and pandas is the package that basically helps Python deal with data frames. And we're talking about tables, data frames. That's the standard way in which we approach data, which is structured tabular data. And so over here, I get everything everything that was in the CSV file itself. And here, for those who are familiar with Python, there are many things you can do. If I want to look at just the age column, I can do something like this. If I want to see how many, so if I go back to DF, if I want to look at job, and I want to see how many people are there from each, how many people are in the different occupations, I can do something like this, which shows me, there are 9,732 people who are, blue collar workers. Management, there are 9,458, and so on. So these are things that you could already do on the browse tool on Alteryx. So this is not something that you have to do on Python. I just want to show you that a lot of the functionality of Python, all the functionality of Python, in fact, is available in the Python tool itself. So one thing that might be interesting for you is that maybe I want to look at how I can change data types, for example. So if I want to change, so if I look at the age column, this is currently read in as a string. It's an object. It's not an integer. So how do I change that? So I can change that by doing something like this. And all the operations, as I mentioned, are available. And then if I run this again, you'll see that it now says that it's an integer. And so it's represented correctly now. So that is so that's the second thing I want to talk about, which is all these functions are available. You want to clean data, you want to impute something. If you want to do an aggregation, you can also do that as well. So I'm going to load this over here. df2, oops. And so over here, you can see that what I did was I did basically what I can do on the sum tool, which is that I grouped by the education, which is a categorical variable. I found the mean of age because age is the only numeric variable, and then I reset the index to put education back as a column in this data frame. And so you can see here that hey, I get basically the mean age for each education category. But this again is something that you could have done on Alteryx itself using this summarize tool. So this is just to kind of give you a brief understanding of a lot of the pandas tools are actually already available. And for me, the real benefit of using Alteryx and Python actually goes beyond this. So this is actually all I had for the introduction, for this at least introduction bit. Before I move on to the more complex ones, are there any questions specific about any questions about, are there any restrictions that you have on Python within the Alteryx workflow itself and stuff. So feel free to like post any questions, or I guess raise your hand.
No questions so far, Sean. You can continue.
Okay, awesome. All right, so that's great. So I'm going to move on to the next one now, which is going through the kind of the specific use cases. I think this is the one where it gets people a little bit more excited. So I'm going to show you how we can do web scraping on Alteryx using the Python tool. So then just give me a couple of give me 1 minute to just copy this over. So right, so I'm going to delete all of these, so we don't need that anymore. Okay, so what I'm using here today is something that's called Selenium. And for those of you who happen to be familiar with what Selenium is, that's great. For everyone else, Selenium is basically a way for us to scrape websites, especially when we need to do something special with these websites. So for example, if I do need to enter a search term on the website, Selenium is kind of basically the only way which allows you to do it. It basically replicates your Google Chrome or any other browser you choose, and it helps you to key in the things as though you are keying it in yourself. So I'm going to show you this right here. So over here, I have a text input tool that this is the search term that I want to put into the website I'm going to scrape. So the website I'm going to scrape is the parliamentary debates that happen in Singapore. So this is the URL itself, and I'm just going to show that to you quickly. So over here, if I open this web page, I get to a page where it says, I can search reports and stuff like that. I can search it by keyword, search within titles and stuff like that. So say I want to search, healthcare, health, for example. Let's not search it. So if I want to search healthcare, I need to do that. Say I want to see it only for these parliament, for example, and I click search. And then when I click search, it opens a new tab, and then it loads all the results. So the really difficult thing here is, how am I going to scrape this the normal way? Because even if I take this and I try and, so if I hit inspect, I can actually see the HTML. But even if I can see the HTML, how am I going to key in the keyword and even trigger the search in the first place? Because if you look over here in this URL, nowhere does it say, I searched health and I had a specific filter on. And this is really the big difficulty of scraping JavaScript websites. And that's where Selenium comes to save the day. So I'm going to close this here and just give you an idea of how this works. So Selenium over here reads in the search term. So you can see that this is us reading in the search term from text input tool. And then we are able to extract the search term itself by doing this. And this code basically helps us to run everything we need to run. So I'm going to show what it does is that it's going to put the text file, the text files of each website into this folder called web scraping results. So let's go and have a look over there. You can see web scraping results over here. So I have a couple here because I ran this before this. I'm just going to delete all of them just to show you that we can run it as usual. And that's it. All right. So now I'm going to run this workflow. And you'll see in a couple of seconds that a Chrome browser will open up. And you'll see here that says Chrome is being controlled by automated test software. And again, this is one of the few things that, are highly specific. Alteryx doesn't have it because, to be honest, like, how often is this? How often do you really need something like this? I just want to show you all these cool things. You can see here that it automatically keyed in the search term that we said. It also ticked that, and then now it also clicked that button automatically. And now we have 20 results, right? And the code that I wrote is only going to fetch the first 20 results. But you'll see in a couple of seconds that it's opening the first link. I'm waiting for it to load. And then after a couple of seconds, it's going to save this page because it takes some time to load, and then open the next one. And it's doing all of these automatically. So this is blank because I think there was an issue. But some things like this, in the past, you might have had someone work through this through the night to download every single page as a HTML file. But now with Alteryx, you're able to do that without even having to lift a finger, more than just clicking the run button. And yeah, so here is the code itself, and you can see that it's running pretty smoothly. It's waiting for the page to load, and I can scroll down, and this is a massive long page, and it's able to do that automatically. So I'm not going to let it continue running because this typically, so web scraping with Selenium typically takes a while, but I hope this gives you a flavor of how exactly you could incorporate really advanced programming stuff on Python, on Alteryx itself, and really improve the functionality and expand the possibilities that you can work with on Alteryx itself. So I'm going to close this, which will raise an error eventually. So I'm going to stop this very quickly. And then we'll move on to the next one, which is the Scikitlearn example. So the Scikitlearn example is a little bit more meant for people who are kind of already familiar. And just to give you an idea of when we talk about the more advanced tools that are available for machine learning, what exactly are we referring to? Okay, so I just copy and pasted that. Okay, give me 1 second to copy this 3 tools over as well. So I see a question that can you automatically scrape what I just did with Python alone? And yes, you can. When you use the Python tool, anything you can do on the Python tool, you could do with just Python alone. The trade-off, as I mentioned in the presentation, is that you would have to have a separate process, right? You would have to run a separate process to run that script. So it's really useful if I'm able to key in here and then get that and then trigger the Python script within Alteryx itself. So for example, if I have things that are dynamic, like dates, search terms, all of these things are easily handled within the workflow itself, rather than me having to go to save it as a CSV or a JSON file and then have Python read that CSV or JSON file before doing something with it. So it reduces all these extra steps of communicating between Alteryx and your external Python process. So over here, I hope that answers the question. So feel free to reach out again after this if it didn't. So I'm importing another data here. So another data set here. So this is a heart. So for those of you who were here for the previous predictive analytics webinar, I'm using basically the same data sets. So this is the Cleveland data, just enforcing the correct data type and then imputing the missing data. And so I'm going to look and check this. All right, so all my code is in here, and I'm going to click run. As you remember, I need to click run for the first time in order to get the data into the Python tool itself. And so I have it over here now, and you can see, all right, so I'm going to do this kind of step by step. So I'm going to insert a cell above and insert a couple of cells here. All right, so here you can see, again, like Alteryx.read #1. #1 because we have it over here. This is the first connection that we've made. And so that just makes sure that we are actually fetching the right data that we are interested in. So here I have df, the data frame. And the data frame, again, all numeric variables, age, sex, and a couple of other variables that pertain to heart disease. So I have df over here. And so one of the first things that people are interested in doing is, hey, I want to do a train test split. I want to split my data for training and for testing. This is what you typically do when you're doing machine learning and data science. So one of the things that isn't currently offered by Alteryx is the ability to stratify that train test split by a specific variable. So if you were there for the predictive analytics webinar, I talked about how you can use a combination of tools to do that stratification. So that stratification basically allows you to ensure that for each group, for the training group and for the testing group, you have a similar proportion of yeses and nos. And that's what stratification does. So over here, you can see that I create first my, my features data set, which is X, and Y is my label, or basically the outcome that I want to predict. And so that is actually the last column, and I'm building that X and Y first. And then after that, I can import the train test split function from the Scikitlearn package, and I can run this code that basically gets me, you know, my training and my testing set split by the X, which are the features, and Y, which is the target variable. And you can see over here that I can hit stratify equals to Y, which tells the function that I want to make sure that the population of, you know, of yeses and nos are consistent across both the training and the test set. And how do I, if I run this, so how do I check this? So what I can do is I can do something like value counts again, which is what we saw earlier. And I can see that, okay, I have 110 zeros and 93 ones. So what about the test? So in the test, we should see a kind of a similar proportion. And yes, exactly, we have 54 and 46. If you multiply that by 2, that's kind of very close to, it's basically 108 to 92, which is as close as you can kind of get in this case. So this magic happens if you can stratify it, and this is something that's, you know, already available in Python itself. But I want to go beyond that. I want to say, okay, if I want, what happens if I want to do, I want to use a lasso model, which is a relatively simple model, but not available in Alteryx. I want to do cross-validation as well. Yes, you can absolutely do that. Over here, I import all the packages. I get the lasso model. I run the cross-validation using the AUC score as the scoring, and I hit that. And then if I look at this, I actually see all the results, and I see how long it took to train the model as well. Unfortunately, this doesn't go any longer. But you can see the test score varies, and that's natural because I'm using different parts of the data set to test it. And the main reason why people use cross-validation is just to ensure that, you know, even in the training process, we are training it as robustly as possible to prevent overfitting. So on to the next one. After I do cross-validation, I know I talked a lot about, you know, using state-of-the-art models. So I'm going to give you an example of that. I'm going to give you my favorite example, which is XGBoost. And so that became really famous like 2 or 3 years ago, because some people started winning Kaggle competitions with this model alone. Originally, it was a custom implementation built by someone, I think, in California, but they made it open source, and now everyone has access to that, you know, prize-winning model. So I can install the package here, and obviously I've gone ahead and installed it before this. And then with this code, I can actually just run the model and train it. So I hit that. You can see that it's running it multiple times just to train it as far as possible. And you can see that that's the evaluation, which is what it's trying to get to train the model against. Lastly, on XGBoost itself, you're also able to see what we call plot importance. Feature importance, and that tells you which features are the most important. So cholesterol, BPS, stuff like that. So all of these things, feature importance is already available on Alteryx itself. But the most important thing is that in Alteryx, the predictive models that are currently available are from R rather than Python. So if you're looking for, you know, a specific Python implementation, that's only currently available on the Python tool itself, or on the Intelligence Suite, which was just released. So that's another option for people. So XGBoost, again, one of the best models out there. We just imported it, you know, installed it, imported it in a couple of lines of code, and now it's already natively available in Alteryx itself for anyone to use. So I don't have to be too worried about, you know, about timing it, about you know, ensuring the Python process runs correctly. I don't have to be too worried about exporting the CSV of, you know, the data set, exporting the CSV of my predictions and stuff like that. All of that is already available in the Python tool itself. So this is how you would do it for the machine learning bits. And so for the last one, and I noticed that we are pretty ahead of time, so I'm just going to talk a bit more about the last one, which is OAuth2 authentication. So this is the one where sometimes when you want to go download data from some APIs, their API isn't particularly nice to you, and they say they will need you to do a login before they allow you to access your data. So that's what we call an OF2 authentication. It's basically a more secure way for making sure that you are getting that you are actually. I hit run, and then it starts running. So here, when I get over here, so it says the authentication flow is completed because I'm already logged in on Facebook. So I'm just going to log out of Facebook and repeat this process. I'm going to log out first. All right, close that. So this has already worked. You can see here that I'm getting all the usual bits like my access token, the account status, and the page IDs I have access to. So I'm going to rerun this just to show you how I can just show you the login process. And if you see over here, it's going to ask me to log in. So I'm going to log in. Again, authentication flow is completed. You can close the window. It automatically sends the authorization code back into the connector on the Python tool. And yeah, and this is how it runs. I have access token, all the business accounts, and all the pages I have access to. So that's just kind of like to give you an idea of how easy it is to build extra functionality into Alteryx just by using Python to solve those difficult bits that are otherwise pretty difficult to do on Alteryx natively. These are the 4 use cases we have. And yeah, so back into the presentation itself. That's really the end of the presentation today. So we ended a bit earlier because I expected some questions. But feel free to reach out to us. I hope this has been a good introduction to how you can use Python to kind of really turbocharge your Alteryx environment. And for people who already know Python, basically how you can include your code, your custom code, into Alteryx workflows without having to choose one or the other. So I hope this was useful, and thank you very much for joining us today. I'm open for any questions for the remaining time we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. So one quick point that I'll add here is to Sean's point earlier that not every algorithm is available in Alteryx as a tool, but Alteryx as a company is slowly bridging the gap between writing actual code and having the capabilities of doing a lot more on Alteryx itself. And with the latest release, that is 2020.2, they released a ton of machine learning tools in Alteryx itself. And the tool will only get stronger going forward. With that, yes, we have a couple of questions. Looks like I missed a few. So one of the users is asking about, are we using the send keys function, selenium.send keys to attach the keyword? And that is how we are searching the web page.
Yeah, so just to show it to you, the exact bit. Oh, so here I just want to show you, I can swap between interactive and production mode. Production just keeps it as a script like this. Interactive loads the Jupyter notebook itself. And yes, you are exactly right. We are hitting the send keys button. So we are finding the actual element in the HTML file that has the form control, and then we send the keys through that. All right, any other questions?
And so I heard that Snakeplane to build a Python package. So I heard about Snakeplane to build a Python package in Alteryx. Do you think it is a good solution?
Okay, so I actually haven't heard of Snakeplane before. That's the first I've heard about that. So I would say, so I think if you want to use so I've heard of the Python SDK for Alteryx. And I think that is probably a good approach, and maybe an even slightly better approach than using a macro. My only worry is, having taken a really brief look at the Python SDK, it seems a little bit more complicated than building a standard macro. So I think if you're just starting out, it might be useful to just start with a Python tool in a standard macro. And then after that, elevate and improve yourself. I mean, once you get to a level where you're comfortable, you can start using, I think, Snake Plane, I think it's for the Python SDK. So use the SDK directly to build a native tool, which is pretty cool. It's just not something that I've played around with yet, but I will get down to that eventually. So thank you very much. That's something I learned today about Snake Plane.
Any future sessions on Alteryx Insights, how to generate insights and publish to gallery and render? Is this on the...
Sorry?
So Srinath, can you tell me a little bit about, I'm trying to understand your question. I mean, are you asking for building out a predictive workflow and then publishing to the gallery, or? So a lot of you are asking about if we'll be sharing this workflow. Yes, the webinar recording will be available on our YouTube channel, and you should see a follow-up email with the workflow and the presentation deck. And we have some follow-up sessions coming up on spatial analytics, in database tools. And once in a while, we'll be dropping a YouTube video as well. We are also doing a parsing the Tableau REST API using Alteryx as a webinar, in which we'll connect Alteryx to Tableau API and then do a use case where you could start bursting out your Tableau reports. All right, feel free to drop off if you have no questions for us. Sean and I will be here for a few more minutes.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us today.
So Sean, Jim is asking if you can describe your workstation setup. Is it Windows 10 for Python distribution?
I'm actually using a Parallels here. So this is actually on my MacBook. So my typical like Python distribution, I usually use Anaconda to handle the packages, and I'm on Mac itself, which generally makes it a bit easier to handle Python. But on this Windows one, I don't have a setup. Actually, I don't have any setup for Python. I'm actually just purely using all the Python tool on Alteryx to run any Python things that I have.
So one of the questions was if we'll be doing a webinar on Alteryx Insights. That is not something we have planned on, but thanks for the feedback. Maybe we'll look into it and plan one. In the meantime, if you want to get started, I think Plural site has one on how to create visualizations using Alteryx, where they do a bunch of insight graphs, and then I'm not sure if they publish it to the Alteryx server, but that is something to check out. We'll also look into this and maybe come up with a future session. Thanks again for the question. All right, with that, I think we'll close it for today. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate you jumping on this webinar with us. We hope you have enjoyed the rest of your day. Thanks.
All right, thank you.